Welcome to On the Bubble Podcast, episode 128. I'm your host, Subasa J. Ueda, and means my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today we're going to be talking about calling Valencia's results, and we're going to also touch on some listener questions as well. But before we do that, how was your week so far, Yuki? We haven't really recorded recently, but anything new in regards of Flesh and Blood for you?
Not really. I've mostly been relaxing. I've been playing some Silver Age as well. Working on Alexi deck. There should be an article coming out for that soon. Yeah, I don't know. Other than that, just kind of enjoying my time, resting a little bit. I was sick after Worlds and recovered not that long after, but was still pretty low energy. So it's been a lot of like catching up on work and stuff like that.
Fair enough. There's been a flu going around, at least near Vancouver. Like a bunch of people that I know got sick, at least for a couple days.
Yeah, you were sick as well, right? This last week?
I was down for over a week like 2 weeks ago, and the big reason I couldn't record was like I was actually just like in bed dying, and then when I finally recovered, it was like holy, it's been like 5 days has passed. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot. I was definitely not as sick as that. I just felt kind of tired. Like I would wake up and I would do something, and then after like 5 hours, I'm like, okay, I go back to sleep, and then I'd sleep like 3 hours, and I just like did that for a while. So I wasn't like all that productive.
Yeah, I was planning on going to an RC, the Magic the Gathering RC for Canada, and on the day of the trip, I said I cannot move. I am not gonna go to this trip. So I just gave up my plane tickets and just that was a sad, minus $300 for the plane trip that I didn't use.
Yeah, that's tough. Well, I'm glad you're recovered now, but yeah, that is always a bummer when you gotta miss a trip that you've already planned and paid for and everything.
And I practice, man, that's it's been a while since I practiced a lot of Magic the Gathering, and I put a little bit of time into playing some combo deck of Magic. I was gonna play the Amulet Titan deck, and that deck is actually just memorizing flowcharts, and I did all the work and I just didn't get to play it. So yeah, I'm sad. I think that deck's gonna get banned, or if not, some hit in some way. So I don't even get to ever play the deck. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people talking about Amulet Titan. I don't really keep up with Magic, but usually if I hear a lot about a deck, that deck ends up getting banned is sort of my my experience these days. So that all checks out. Yeah, that's too bad that you don't get to make use of the practice.
It's what it is. Okay, then let's move on and talk about, or actually before we do that, do you want to do a Patreon shout out?
Yeah, so thank you to all of our patrons who get back to the show. We really appreciate you, and we couldn't be making the content that we're making without you. I know I've been a little slow with uploading the Syndra deck list from Worlds. I will be doing that this week. Just been kind of low energy, but so hopefully by the time you're listening to this, it will already be out. But if not, it will be out shortly after. I'm probably planning to work on it later today, so that should be coming. And yeah, just thank you to all of our patrons, all of our listeners. You kind of make this all possible, and it means a lot to us. Also, we are sponsored by Invasion. They are one of the largest Canadian retailers for Flesh and Blood. So shout out to Invasion. They're great for all your singles and sleeves and stuff like that. They have some of the largest stock in all of Canada for Flesh and Blood singles. And I know for folks like us in Vancouver, it's hard to get singles. There's just not that many people. There's not really any stores where you can buy singles, so ordering from Invasion is a great way to go. And if you want to order from Invasion, you can use the code YLB5 for 5% off on your checkout on all singles.
We will talk about calling Valencia. This calling was kind of interesting. I guess we'll start with talking about the meta game. There was 422 players that were registered, and the usual suspects were at the top of the meta. So we'll go for the breakdown first. There were 79 Syndras, the most played deck in this format. That's a lot of Syndras.
Yeah. Sort of makes sense. Going into Worlds, talk was Syndra was best deck. There was only one copy in top 8, but it was mixed format, and Syndra did end up winning the event. So going to the next calling afterwards, seeing Syndra most repped, I think not a surprise.
Followed up by Gravy Bones with 45 and Verdance with 41. And then a slight downtick to go into Arachne Marionette at 32 and KO at 30. So these were kind of like the usual suspects in a sense, except Arachne Marionette, it's kind of getting a resurgence again.
Yeah, we kind of saw some Assassin in the metagame back around like Singapore. At that time, it was mostly Slippy. And then, Bonds got banned. There were not too many Assassin decks. Verdance was really popular. Not so great for Assassin. But I think as things have shifted towards Syndra being really good, Arachne decks are pretty good into Syndra. And also I think the lists themselves have been getting refined. I know lots of people have been working on the deck. I know like Kashi has been making a lot of content on Arachne on YouTube for free. So if you're like interested in Arachne decks, I would check out Kashi's stuff. But yeah, there's just kind of been like a lot of interest in this deck, a lot of developments, and I think that they've been working very hard on the list. So it kind of makes sense to me that this deck has been trending up in popularity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like a solid deck into exactly Syndra. It's probably Syndra's nightmare right now, right? Like it's to play into Arachne Marionette that's been teched into trying to beat Syndra. Sounds kind of impossible.
It's not impossible, but it's not great. You're definitely unfavored. It's it's a tough matchup. And then I think like Dash.io is also kind of tough for Syndra. Is like the other one.
Mm-hmm. And talking about Dash.io, Dash.io is the next most played deck, followed up by Acilio, and then Dorenthia, Kasai, Prism, Florian, all in the 25 to 12 range. It kind of feels like this has been like the meta game, right? Like these about 11 decks or so were the most it's like the most commonly played deck so far in this format.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you kind of have like your top three Syndra, Gravy, Verdance, and then all the other decks are kind of like good into some of these top decks, is how I would put it. Like Dorenthia is good into Syndra and Gravy, but like not so good into Verdance, for example. And they all kind of like have their own version or like flavor of this.
Yeah, it's usually good at the two of the three top decks, and then sometimes it feels like it's unwinnable if you've played into the other one.
Yeah. I think they're all a little different. Like some are a little more polarized, some are a little less polarized, but yeah, they all kind of have this feature of being good into some of the top decks, but usually not all of them, because if they were, they would just be the best deck.
Yeah, I guess that would make sense. And then there were like 20 other different heroes, and we're not really gonna mention those, but a lot of heroes are, close to playable, or at least like not embarrassing if you bring them. And just the top three decks were still the same: Syndra, Gravy, Verdance. But what's really, really interesting about this event was the top 8. I guess we'll just read out who top 8 at this event. So then we have 2 Acilios, we have 3 Gravy Bones, 1 Dash.io, an Arachne Marionette, and 1 Syndra? No.
There's 2 Arachne Marionette.
Oh, that's not a Syndra. That's 2 Arachne Marionettes and no Syndras.
Yeah, so pretty poor performance from Syndra. I looked through the standings because sometimes you have these events where people don't top 8, and then you look at like the top 16 or top 32, and there's like a million Syndras, and it's like, okay, like a bunch of them missed. I think the cut was X2, and I think there was only like 1 or 2 Syndras at X3, which is 1 win away. So Syndra like did not do well this event at all. Like no copies in top 8, obviously good, but also there weren't really many Syndras even like close to top 8.
Oh wow, that's actually a really interesting data point. Do you have any thoughts on why that's the case?
I'm not like totally sure. I'm a little bit surprised by this data and confused. My takeaway in Philadelphia was like I played Syndra at Philadelphia, and I'm like, man, this Syndra deck is so good. I feel like I just want to keep playing more Syndra. I don't know if I'll play anything else until the meta shifts. And then I see this event, and I'm just like, I don't know what to make of it. I think like one obvious thing is the Arachne Marionettes rising in popularity is not good for Syndra. That matchup is tough, especially if you haven't practiced it and you're not teched for it. If you have like more D-reacts, things like this, it does get better, but I think you are unfavored. Dash.io is also a deck that we've been seeing that has been unfavored. And interestingly, KO Armed and Dangerous is a deck that we saw. There was a lot of hype for early in the format. It kind of underperformed and fell off. And then we saw kind of a resurgence in Philadelphia with people taking KO. And there's actually a copy in top 8 in the hands of Florin Christian Lagen, and the deck did a fair bit better. And we also saw the deck do reasonably at this event, none in top 8. But according to the Fab Blazing data, KO is actually slightly favored in Syndra now, which is maybe a matchup I need to revisit, because like I remember before feeling like it was very, very Syndra favored. But it's very interesting that across the last 2 big events, KOs have actually been slightly favored into Syndra. It's like a 55-45 kind of deal.
Oh, okay. It's actually quite a big edge for KO.
Well, 5%, yeah.
Yeah. 5% both ways, right? So it's like a 10% gap. That's 1 in 10 games.
Yeah.
So I would have thought it would have been like closer to like 52-53%, but okay, yeah, 55% is a solid edge up into Syndra. Okay. Were there a bunch of KOs in like the top 16 range? Do you know?
I didn't actually check for that, so I'm not totally sure, but I did see that they had positive win rate into Syndra.
Oh, okay. That makes sense, yeah. KO is like one of those decks. It's like the more rounds there are, the worse this deck gets, because like you play 12 rounds you play 12 rounds, and if you low roll 3 of them, you don't top 8 anymore. That's that happens quite often, right?
Yeah, the deck is definitely kind of variance prone. You can beat a lot of things, but you don't always. And I guess Brute has always been a bit like this, but it feels like, especially right now, you kind of win and lose based on your blood rushes to a large degree. Like if you have the really good blood rush turns, fantastic. If you don't, that game is probably hard for you. Yeah, no, I guess KO did not place highly. There was none in the top 32 as I'm scrolling through.
Okay, yeah. So you're probably looking at an X and 4. So like a positive average win record, but it doesn't actually have the ability to.
I think it was like right around 50%. It might have been like 49%, but positive into Syndra. Yeah, there are some X4s. There are quite a few Syndras at X4 as well.
That would make sense, yeah. Because KO always feels like the deck where if you high roll, you lose to it. So like it's like a really frustrating loss, or it's really frustrating to play into KO. If they don't do the high rolly thing, then you kind of get to play a fair game that you're favored in, and then when they do low roll, they just like kind of explode and do nothing. Yeah, that's my image of KO.
Yeah, I agree with this. I was kind of curious about how KOs were beating Syndras, and I was looking through the Calling Philadelphia or Worlds Philadelphia footage, and the Syndra games I watched were like not that close, but kind of close. Like the KOs got pretty low, and I think both the games were like double Blood Rush games, and I was like, well, that kind of checks out. When you draw 2 Blood Rush Duellas in like your 4-turn game, it's pretty good.
It is true. Okay, then let's talk about the top 8 and its winners. So the finals was played, and the matchup was Dio versus Gravy. So Gravy had a really strong performance in this event, right? Like 3 in the top 8 and 1 winning the event.
Yeah,
that's really impressive. Like we saw like a downtick in Gravy at Worlds, and now we see a Gravy winning and 3 in top 8. Why do you think this is the case? Like, do you think Gravy is just like a good deck that like is kind of being slept on right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gravy's strong and has been strong. I think probably the biggest thing is with Syndra not doing well, it kind of opens the door for Gravy to do better. He definitely has some bad matchups. Syndra isn't great. Acilio, who is in top 8, is also not a great matchup. But the thing about Gravy is his top end is so good that I think when Gravy draws his good hands or his good half of the deck, he can beat pretty much anybody. And then he also has some very good matchups. Like I think Arachne Marionette is something like 27% into Gravy, like really poor. Verdant's Gravy, I don't remember the percentage, but it's also like a really Gravy favored matchup. So yeah, you kind of have this ability to like high roll your bad matchups and then get some free wins, and that's pretty powerful. And if you hit the metagame where Syndra is underperforming, seeing Gravy do well Kind of makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Gravy always does feel like a deck that, if you are a master on the Gravy, it feels like a lot of your games are unwinnable for the other side. Like, if I'm playing an assassin into Gravy, it just feels awful if I'm playing like anything remotely under rate or like not efficient to clear the allies. You feel like you're burning so much value just to clear like a rigor mortis or even like a chum. Like clearing a chum is so hard.
Yeah. And then if they like fearless you, it can just put you completely out of the game, and they can draw the like Leyline Conqueror part of the deck and just blow you up with like 20 damage and an ally. And it's a very scary deck. And I think even though the Syndra matchup is unfavored, when you're playing somebody who is really well versed in Gravy, the matchup is much closer. Great Gravy has some pretty good winning chances even into his bad matchups like Syndra.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we have Calling Seattle coming up pretty soon. Does this data change what you are planning on bringing to Seattle, or are you thinking of just playing Syndra anyways?
I'm a little undecided. It definitely gives me pause. I was like, I think almost guaranteed locked on Syndra, and now I'm kind of wondering. I might, if we'll see. If I have the energy for it, I'll probably try and play some Syndra Marionette and Syndra into KO and see what those matchups are like, because yeah, I think they're kind of ones that I could use a little bit of work on, especially as deck lists have evolved, and kind of see exactly where they lie, and that may affect my decision. But I could also just see myself playing Syndra. One thing I will note about Syndra doing not so well is her win rate was still close to 50%. I think it was slightly negative, like around 49. But we usually see the top played deck, unless it's really, really broken, trending closer to 50%. So that's like not a huge surprise. And also, I did notice a lot of the strong names that some of which I saw on Syndra at Worlds were not on Syndra at this event. Like Paul Van Heysel, who ended up winning on Gravy, was playing Syndra at Worlds. I think like Brody Spurlock was playing Syndra at Worlds, was playing Marionette this time. And a deck like Marionette actually had a lot of strong players. You had like Brody, you had Jacob Clements, I think you had Kashi, I forget who else, but I remember seeing like multiple strong players on Marionette. So I think there may be an effect of like what the strong players are playing at the event, shifting it by like a few percentage points. And when your gap between like Gravy is like 53% and Syndra is 49%, you know, those few percentage points potentially matter quite a bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, this game is really about who is playing the decks and not the decks itself a lot of the times, right?
Yeah, that is like a huge factor. Yeah.
Okay. Then anything else you want to talk about CC and the Calling Valencia before we quickly touch the showdown that happened?
No, not too much. I just shout out to Paul Van Eysel. Congrats on winning the Calling. I believe Paul also top aided PT London this year on Aurora, I want to say, something like this. So yeah, congrats to Paul, somebody that I've played a bit with and I guess sort of like know in passing. So yeah, cool to see him do well. Why don't you tell us about the showdown?
Yeah, so we don't actually have that much information on the showdown, but the showdown was won by Chain. Let me get the name of who won it in a second.
Oh, I have the top 8 somewhere.
Oh, do you have the top 8 somewhere?
Can I find it? It's a great question.
And I found the winner's name. It was Peter Olson bringing Chain to the Silver Age Battle Hardened. Sorry, it wasn't a showdown. It was a Battle Hardened because it is still 2025. And I think starting... Oh, no. The Seattle one's also technically a Battle Hardened.
I think there's also some Battle Hardens in 2026, like early 2026, some standalone ones that were already planned, but we are sunsetting Battle Hardens and shifting to
showdowns.
Shifting to showdowns soon. So
well, it's also just like a significant prize increase for the showdown. So I want it to be showdowns as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I agree. A nice thing that But a potentially nice thing, I hope. So I heard that this event was still capped at 128 players, which I was a little bit surprised at. I hope that they reconsider this because I feel like a really nice thing about doing the Sunday showdowns as Silver Age, you have short rounds. So 35-minute rounds, you don't necessarily need to cap it at 128 players. Say you only play, I forget how many, it's like 7 rounds or 8 rounds that they try to make the Battle Hardened so that the venue doesn't close. You could theoretically have a way higher cap with 35-minute rounds and Silver Age and still finish in time just because the rounds are so much shorter. So they might be able to accommodate like 500 players or something, for example. Somebody would need to like plan it out and do the math on it, but yeah, I think that they can potentially accommodate way more players and solve that sort of like sign up issue that we've been having because Worlds, they tried to like fix this by making 2 battle hardens, and I still just like failed to get into either battle harden. So it was like an improvement, but it was just like, like if they can just raise the cap by like, 2 times by adding a round or like 4 times by adding 2 rounds, that would be huge.
Yeah, and yeah, as long as it's just Silver Age, like this is very possible and easily done. Honestly, it would be kind of nice to have extra rounds in a battle hardened, so you don't have to XO to top 8 an event too.
Well, if you have more players, you might still need to X1 or whatever, X2, but yeah.
Yeah, but now imagine like adding 2 more rounds to this event and then like only 100 more people show up. Then you can easily X1, X2 to top 8 instead of like, being losing your first round and being like, do I drop from this event and play something else?
I think usually all the X1s make it, but yeah, sometimes the X2s particularly don't. Losing the first round is really tough because you have to win out. I can't find the top 8 of this, but there were a lot of big names. I remember there was like Ian Zhang, Pablo Pintor, a few other pretty big names in that top 8 of the Silver Age event, which was cool.
Okay. So skill format is kind of what it sounds like to me then. And winner by Chain. Yeah, Chain is just consistently showing up results in Silver Age right now. Other than your Lexi deck, have you tried Chain so far, or do you think you're gonna bring Chain, or do you think you're gonna bring Lexi to the Battle Hardened Seattle if you don't day to?
Currently, I'm probably going to bring Lexi because I just like that deck. I think it is probably not the best deck in the format, but I think it's pretty decent. I think your Guardian matchup is a little tricky. You seem to be good into a lot of the mid-range stuff, but there's just like so many heroes that there's a million matchups I haven't played, so I don't know for sure. And generally, it seems like you have decent tools into the aggro decks because I don't know, you do a bunch of damage and you have disruption, which is like a pretty good combination. So I think I'll probably play Lexi, but Chain seems like he might be the best or one of the best decks, at least for now. I think there's like a ton of room for people to explore and adapt and do different things, but Chain is super, super powerful. I kind of wouldn't be surprised if they end up hitting Ebonfold. It's kind of like pay a resource to draw a card because you banish a card from your hand, and if it's Shadow, you draw a card, so you banish like a blood deck card that you can pay. But it's like arguably better than that because usually having the card in Blood Dead, if it's like Bounding Demigon, it gets +1, and if it's like a Rune Gate card, you can play it for no resources so long as you have Rune Chance and the deck's made to have Rune Chance. So sometimes it's like pay a resource to like draw a card and play one of your like 2 or 3 costs for free, which is just like kind of insane in a format where they've banned like Snaps and Goliath Gauntlet and Hardened Crosstrap and stuff.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, no, the chain deck is looking pretty disgusting, honestly. Like the Rune Gate chain is definitely unfair.
Yeah, it's just very easy for it to do like 20 damage. Pummel is in a lot of those decks and is just like maybe Guardian needs Pummel. Guardian's very good right now as well though, but yeah, Pummel is just like 20 life format and getting pummeled is like it is often just game over is what it feels like.
Do you know my favorite line with these Rune Gate chain decks is like Soul Reaping generates you a resource and then you can also pummel it if you Bloodtorn bodice it. So like you can do something disgusting turns of just being like, oh, I'm going to Bloodthorn Bodice, attack you with Soul Reaping after using Chain's ability, and then I have 2 resources floating. I pummel with the go again, attack you with something else. Oh,
Yeah, definitely gross. And if you're playing like Mauvrion Skies, you like pummel the Mauvrion Skies and you get Rune Chance and they discard a card and then you play another Blood Deck card for free. And it's just like, yeah, it gets pretty out of hand. Pummel is, I haven't played enough of the matchup to call for bans on a card like Pummel, but Pummel is very good, is what I'll say about it. It's at least very good.
Yeah, and there's no D-Reacts, right, in this format
yes.
that are like the common answer to Pummel is Sink Below. Sink Below is banned. Fate Foreseen is banned, right? Like these cards are banned. Like you don't get to play these cards. So yeah. Pummel probably should go. I would be pretty happy if they just banned Pummel and then made people play like more fair Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see them go this direction as well. I've also had games like against the Guardians where they're just like, turn 0, heave my red Thunderquake. And then they just like block 1 card. And then they're just like, okay, 4-card hand, Thunderquake, pummel you. Here's 14, discard a card. And I'm like, I'm not really sure how I win.
Yeah. Okay, enough about Silver Age. So we had this listener question for a while. We just didn't have the time to really talk about it. And then I kind of wanted to touch on this topic because it is a interesting topic that would be interesting for a lot of people, at least for the people that don't play super competitively. So we had a question on Discord from Christian May, and the question goes, how do you find a testing partners / a team? I'm not playing for super long yet, and I'm definitely interested in being competitive. My locals are super nice, welcoming, and fun, but most of them are not very competitive and don't have that much time. So this is a question basically regarding of like, how do you improve on a game without having a current team, or how do you find or get involved in these teams, right? Like we hear about the like the team invasion. Is it called Team Dragon Shield? The min-max team?
Super Armory.
Oh yeah, it's called Super Armory. So like these are like pro teams that are, kind of demolishing these like Worlds event, these Pro Tour events. How do you get involved in teams like this?
It's an interesting question. My perspective is definitely like a little shaped by being in the game pretty early on. So I think it was like, it's just kind of like a little bit of a different time in some ways. But for me, the way that I've gotten involved with my testing team is just honestly going to events, meeting people at those events, talking with them, and just like networking and doing that. So some of that was like initially talking with my local, Eric Lair, and then from there, kind of like branching out, meeting more people that I test with, like Nia Tran through Eric. And as we're heading into like Pro Tour 1, I like reached out to a content creator who Oliver Fee from OKNY. They don't really do content these days, but they were pretty big back then. And I met like Oliver and Ian Zhang through that. And it's just kind of like gradually expanded from there, just like getting to know people, people's friends, who's going to these events, who's prepping for these events, who's practicing, and just finding kind of the people that I guess I get along with. I have good conversations with, I have good games with, these types of things, and just kind of like making that conversation and reaching out and being like, hey, do you want to play games online? And that's sort of like how a lot of this for me started. It was like very organic. And for a long time, we weren't even really a team so much as just like a group of friends who played together. And it's sort of developed into a team since we've all been going to pro tours and these top level events and competing and getting better at the game and getting more serious at the game. And the game's been getting more competitive and more serious. So it's kind of like all been building up. I guess my advice for people getting into the game right now would be ideally reach out to your locals. That's usually the easiest place to start. Maybe try to see if some of them, even if they don't have time, have a good mind for the game, want to improve. Think about the game in a productive way, have good conversations after the game are like all really good things to look for. And if you're not able to find that locally, try getting involved in like online communities or traveling to events in paper and trying to meet people that way. And I think really just sort of like the more you network, get to know people, and find people who I think ideally are at a similar place to you in terms of like level of play and what they're trying to achieve. So maybe, for example, maybe your group is trying to win their first ProQuest and you're all kind of aligned. So when it comes to ProQuest season, we're going to really practice and try to win our first ProQuest. And that's very aligned and that's very good. Or maybe you're all, you're planning, there's a bunch of North American callings next year and you're like, hey, I'm going to travel to 4 of them or whatever. I'm going to try and find some other people who are also going to those events. And we're going to partner up, practice for those events and really kind of hunker down. But ideally, you're kind of working on similar events and similar goals. I think if you're not going to the Pro Tour, it's going to be really hard to test with people who are going to the Pro Tour because you're not playing the same event, you're not playing the same metagame. It just doesn't tend to work super well. The incentives aren't very aligned. Whereas if it's somebody who's preparing for the same things as you and wants the same things as you, it's much easier to kind of be on the same page and progress together. And sometimes you can grow with those people, and sometimes you may outgrow some of those people and meet other people that you can play with in the future. And it just, it sort of depends how it goes.
I really like the point you made about networking. I think networking is really important. Just even on Discord, you go to these, the purple Discord is what we call it, the main North American Flesh and Blood TCG community. If you go into some of these specific channels and just start talking and just get to know these people online, and then when you go to these callings, if you can actually meet them and talk to them, this game is quite small, so you'll end up talking with people that are it's not hard to find people that are on the same level as you, right? So for example, if you're just trying to prepare for calling, it's pretty easy to find somebody who would want to go to or who will be at the calling anyway. So you can physically meet these people and start talking. And because the community is so small, it's not too hard if you're really trying to improve to find a group of people that are trying to improve, trying to get to the PT, or even practicing at the PT level. It's not too hard to find connections with these people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that idea of reaching out on Purple Discord, getting to know people. You'll probably find a whole mixed bag of people in Purple Discord because it's just an open Discord for everybody. But you might find, maybe there's 1 or 2 people in there that you tend to agree with or have interesting conversations with and bounce ideas back and forth, and maybe you kind of work on the deck a little bit together. That can be somebody that you go, hey, I've enjoyed chatting with you in Purple Discord, do you want to jam some games sometime? And that can be the start of it's as simple as that. It doesn't have to be I don't think you usually lead with hey, I'm making a testing team, do you want to be on the team? Usually just kind of play games organically first, get to know them, and then maybe hey, I'm preparing for this event, do you want to prepare for this event or help me prepare for this event? And it can be like that. And similarly, if you play against somebody at one of these events that you go to and you have let's say you have an interesting game, it was fun playing with them, and maybe after you have some discussion about the important parts of that game and where one person pulled ahead, or there's just some thoughtful discussion afterwards. That can just be hey, I really enjoyed this, would you want to play some games on Talishar sometime? And it's really as simple as that.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's kind of important here is that because in 2025, we're not in 2005 anymore. You can find these teams or just the people to play with online, right? It doesn't have to be in person. I think organically, maybe 20, 25 years ago, it was kind of impossible to test online. But nowadays, you can just play on Talishar on Discord, right? For example, your group, your testing group is people from all over the world, right? It's not just our Vancouver group, essentially.
Yeah. We have quite a few people on the West Coast, but some of them are in California, Vegas, Colorado, which is technically not the coast, but yeah, Vancouver. So it's pretty spread out. Then we have some people Toronto area, Philadelphia. We know someone there. We know some people in the Netherlands. So, immediately before an event, we typically do some in-person testing, and that's really fun and a great way to connect and see each other. But most of the time, we're in a Discord, and we're in Discord calls, playing online together, and just hanging out, chatting, playing games. And yeah, I think that is like a big part of getting into this idea of like testing partners or teams. As you get to know people and have a more established group, I think you can start to improve your testing by being kind of like more, I guess, intentional with your testing. I want to work on this particular matchup. Can we play this matchup? And sometimes maybe that means I'll play another matchup that you want, and we'll kind of trade games, and we can help each other practice the matchups that we want. That might mean testing certain cards in those matchups, being like, hey, my Gravy Bones matchup isn't great. If I add like Midas Touch, how does that improve my matchup, for example? And so, yeah, a lot of testing gets better, with like a particular group that you enjoy and have good discussion with and you play with somewhat regularly, but B, with just like kind of having goals or things that you're working on with each game. Because I think it's really easy to sort of just like hang out and play games and get reps, and that's valuable and certainly better than not doing that. But I think that if you're very specific and like, the top 3 decks are Gravy, Verdant, Syndra, I want to make sure I know my Gravy, Verdant, Syndra matchups, and maybe I also want to play some into like Acilio and Marionette and Dash.io, because those were some of the most rep decks, and those are what I'm expecting to see. And then we're going to make game plans for those matchups. And, that's sort of like how you take it to the next level. But if you're just starting out, I would say focus on the social aspect, getting to know people, finding people to play games with. And ideally, those are like quality games where you have good discussions and learnings after the games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like that is the difference between like the top teams and the people who are just testing for a PT, right? Like that's kind of where the gap widens between like the pro teams in quotations. Like because you guys are doing this, like the actual intentional matchups, and like making sure you know your matchup spreads, things like that. That's the thing that's providing the biggest gap between the top pros and the people who are like just queued for the PT and practicing for the PT. So like having these like dedicated times to be able to do that is a very strong edge you can gain from having these competitive teams. But I think if you are just starting out, it's going to be really tough to even like find enough people to be able to do this with. That's why this gap exists, right? Is like it's just really tough to find the group of people and like the skill level to even get this done. I feel like that's something you can worry about after you get to the PT and start like being a regular on the PT, right? If you're just playing for the callings and stuff like that, do you think this is kind of excessive?
Yeah, I mean, like I think as you get further and further up in competition, the more focus your test, like that you really want to have more focused testing. I think it really kind of comes down to like how serious you are. I think if you're somebody that really, really wants to do well and get better, finding people who also really want to do well and get better is going to serve you the best, right? Like having those aligned goals is super, super valuable. So I think it really depends kind of like, yeah, what is your goal? How are you trying to approach this? But I think basically like, there's time. You put time into the game, you get reps, you play more, you get better. That's like the obvious part. And then the whole thing about finding people to play with and then maybe getting more intentional with the testing is increasing the efficiency of that time that you're spending. And those are kind of like the two things you can do. You can be more efficient with your time, and you can also just play more. I was looking at like the Fabrary year in review thing, and I was kind of surprised. I played in 2025, apparently I've played 372 tracked games on Talishar, which is like maybe, I feel like maybe on the low end, like compared to a lot of people I see that I know is like 700. Granted, like I probably skew knowing people who are very entrenched into the game. So for many people, it'll be like, wow, 372 games, that's so much. But I mean, that's like roughly a game a day on average. Obviously, sometimes much more, sometimes much less. And I think I probably have some untracked games in there and, paper games and other stuff. So there's other things going on there. But I think all of that is to say that, like, it's not just a function of playing as many games as possible. It's also about the quality and what those games are like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. There are some people who just play infinite number of games.
Yeah. I know a lot of our locals just play they play so many games. They tell me how many games they play, and I'm like, holy, I do not play that many games. I just don't. I think some of our locals, my 372 games across the year, I think some of our locals will play more than that in a season, for example.
In a season? You mean in a week?
Yeah, maybe even in a week. Yeah. So yeah, there's some of that. For me, I find a lot of the random Talishar games pretty low return on my time. I might play 10 games and one of them feels useful is kind of my rough estimate. If I'm learning a deck, it's different. But if it's a deck that I know and I'm really trying to work on something specific, it's the time efficiency is just so poor that I'd rather play fewer games, play games that matter, really think about them. I also watch a lot of Flesh and Blood, so that's practice that is not playing games. It's not on there, and maybe that's not exactly related to the question about testing teams and all of that, but it is a way to practice. I think watching coverage and trying to not just watch it from a popcorn, I'm going to enjoy these games perspective, but being what are the decisions players are making? What are the cards in their hand? Think through what is the play that I would make? What is the play that they made? Why did they make that play? Was their play better than mine, or did they miss something and I actually saw something? These are all really valuable ways to improve, especially if it's a deck that you're playing. So if I would recommend watching lots of games in general. They're all valuable, but if you're picking up Verdance, go through all the coverage of recent events, look through all the Verdance games, study those Verdance games, try to figure out what decisions those Verdance players are making, or same thing applies for whatever hero you're working on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's actually a really good good advice. If you are gonna look into playing a deck, if you just go and watch the coverage games, those are reasonably strong games of Flesh and Blood too. They're not random games that are gonna be played on Talishar.
Yeah, chances are you can learn something, and typically as you get into day 2, top 8, the games get better and better quality too. Sometimes the early rounds are hit and miss. There's definitely strong games early rounds. There's definitely games early rounds where you're these people are not as experienced, and that's fine. It's early rounds of a calling. That's how it goes. But yeah, typically as you get later and later in the day, the players get stronger.
Mm-hmm. And then on a similar note, the same person also asked, on a similar note, how much time does one have to put into the game to be really competitive? We are kind of already on this topic, so flesh down a little bit more on that. And then in brackets, they say regular calling day 2 conversion as a metric, maybe. That's a good question. How much do you think you have to? How much time do you think it'll take to be a regular day 2 calling player? So this is a player that's going to be going 6-3 on day 1 of a calling. Is that right?
It's usually X2.
X2? Is it 6 and 2? Is it 8 rounds?
7 or 8 rounds day 1, depending on the size. If you live in North America, the North American callings are typically a little bigger, and they're usually 8 rounds. And then I think Europe is 7 or 8, and I feel a lot of the APAC callings tend to be 7. If it's attached to a pro tour or something, they're usually quite big. But that's sort of been, I feel my general observation. This is not, I'm not looking through any data right now, so I could be wrong, but that's sort of my impression. Usually 7 or 8, and depends on your region a bit.
Okay. So you need to get a 6 and 2 record, a 5 and 2 record at a calling. That is kind of tough, right? That's not an easy bar to get above, honestly. I think myself, I'm usually X3, X2 in callings, somewhere in that range. So I usually barely make day 2 depending on the deck I bring.
Yeah. And I think it's also worth noting that I think obviously strong players will be more consistent with making day 2, but I think also on that note, basically every calling there are strong players that don't make day 2. It's it's hard. It's not making day 2 of a calling is not free. It's hard, and we miss sometimes. I have missed day 2 of a calling before. So yeah, just to some level, we're playing card games, and card games are hard, and there's variance, and keep that in mind.
To get to that level of being like, I guess like this will be a good metric would be like if you're expecting to day two, right? Like these are players that are expected to day two. If you like go and like talk to them, you're like, oh, what's your record? Are you X1, X2, X3? Like, there are people, you know, the image of players that I'm getting, right? Like I go up to you and being like, are you still X1? Like question mark, like you're probably X1, maybe X2. And then we get surprised when you're X3 type of players. Like how much time do you think it takes to get there?
This is like such a hard question to answer. It's hard for me to like put like this is how much time it takes on it. I think that like something I'll say is there's kind of like multiple factors. There's a bit of like how much total time have you spent playing Flesh and Blood? I think if you've been playing Flesh and Blood for a very long time, you can probably play a little less and get there because you have a lot of like cumulative time. Whereas if you're very new, you might need to like invest quite a bit of time up front, or maybe maybe you're not able to invest a lot of time up front. You kind of play more gradually, and then maybe you need to play for like a few years and you'll get there eventually. So I think that basically like the more time you spend up front, the faster that you can get there. But I think it's also really going to depend on like you as a player. We learn at different speeds. It might depend on like your deck selection. If you're somebody who is pretty willing to pick up and learn whatever they think is the best deck, you're probably going to have an easier road. If you're a specialist, you may have a harder road, or maybe even a close to impossible one, depending on the deck you're specializing in. Like if you are a Tekla Vossen main, you're going to have a much harder time than if you're somebody that's just playing meta decks. So it's kind of like a lot of factors that contribute to this. Maybe the way I would try to answer this is less of a like, you need X number of hours, and more of a, when I go into an event like this and expect to do well, and when I talk to other players who go to these events and typically do well and are this type of player that Jay is talking about, I think they typically know the deck that they're playing, like pretty inside out. They know the lines, they know what they're doing, they know their sideboard plans and their matchup plans into at least the top decks. So that thing that we're talking about I want to know my Gravy, Syndra, Verdance, and probably like Dio, Marionette, Acilio matchups. I've played them. I know how to sideboard. I know the decisions I need to make to win those games. I know how I win those games. I know how I lose those games. And I think that usually if I'm at that point, I feel quite prepared and I feel like I'm able to do well. And if I'm not at that point and I run into those matchups, it often shows. Like I'm often like, oh, like I don't really know this matchup as well as my opponent. And that like is probably going to cost me quite a few win percentage points. So you need enough time to get to that point is kind of what I would feel like. I don't know if that's like a cop out, but I think everybody's like so different in how long that takes.
Yeah, I actually really like that answer. I feel like you got there. Yeah, I think the players that are going to be like consistently day twoing callings, like like half the time or more, are gonna be those players that know their sideboard and their matchup spread for the like the top 15 decks almost, right? Like it's close to the top 15 decks you probably know the matchups for. And that's going to be including decks that are like not as well played, like Florian and stuff like that too, right? Like Jarl, things like that too. Like you'll have a like you might not have a game plan into like max the hype nitro, but like you're probably not going to play into that. But you do still want to have a kind of a game plan into like Kasai, Prism, Doranthia, like those kinds of decks you kind of still need to know, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to like maybe illustrate the like role of experience and how that can shift the amount of time you need is like I typically play lots of different decks, partially just to help other people get reps, right? We kind of talked about that, practicing specific matchups. You trade reps, you play different decks, you learn them. So all of these top decks I've played at least a little bit. And I think to a large degree, there sometimes are matchups where it's like, I haven't actually played a ton of this matchup, but I played other decks into this. I've talked to people about it. I've played the game, like, I played like one or two into that deck. And like, I understand what I'm supposed to do. I understand the matchup like on a conceptual level. And is that as good as if I had like 20 reps in the matchup? No, probably not, but it's also probably like good enough. And that's something that I can do because I've been playing the game a long time and I sort of like understand all of these decks and what they want. And generally, like maybe maybe I haven't played Syndra Isilio recently, but I played Syndra Isilio like 3 months ago, and I can, brush up on that a tiny bit, look at new deck lists, think about how that's changed things, and kind of get away with playing fewer games. But it's because I've put in the games previously, right? So, yeah, as you get more experience and as you get to know more of these decks, you might not need to spend as much time to get there. But if you're learning all these decks and you don't know the cards and you don't know what their hero abilities do, it's going to take you more reps to get to that point where you really understand what the deck is trying to do and how your deck interfaces with that deck.
Yeah. I think as a general metric, like if you're at a point where you have to pick up and read your opponent's card, you're probably not doing well.
Yeah, unless it's just like you probably see like strong players pick up cards all the time, but it's typically like reminding themselves of something really small, like oh, is this one if it attacks a hero, or is this just when it attacks that it has an effect? And like that might be relevant against Gravy. So like which ones trigger if they attack me and which ones trigger when they attack an ally. And you're like, I think I know the answer, but I'm going to double check to make sure I'm not like missing something here.
A lot of the time, it's mostly just a double check more than like to make sure, to actually read the card for the first time. It's typically they played against it 10 times. They're just like picking up Bonds of Agony to make sure, okay, it's 3 or more, like things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or it's like Hunter or Hunted. They pick it up and be like, oh, this card can't actually rip from graveyard. Like it's something that a lot of people miss.
Yeah, exactly. Or like sometimes you're like, hey, does this interaction work? And you'll pick up the card and be like, want to double check. This is like a bit of a niche interaction. Yeah, it works, or no, it doesn't work. But often people are reading cards for that reason rather than first time. So
yeah. Oh man, the card I regret the most for not picking up and reading is Remorseless.
Yeah.
It's like, I know what Remorseless does, but then like if you don't pick it up and read that card, and you just go like, I'm gonna de-react, and they're like, you can't de-react. I'm like, why can't I de-react? Or pick up Remorseless, like, I can't de-react? I don't even, at this point, I don't even know if it's from Arsenal or from hand you can't de-react from, but somewhere on that card, it says you cannot de-react from somewhere.
Yeah, that's a great example, and just picking it up, being like, sometimes you might even know, you're like, oh, I think I can de-react from Arsenal, and then you read it and you're like, yes, that's what it says, or no, that's not what it says, and just like making sure that you have the interaction right is usually what you're trying to do. But yeah, so I think that's a point that you're trying to get to, and how you get there is going to vary a lot. Playing the game helps, talking about the game helps, studying the game through coverage and all of these things helps, and that's part of the reason playing decks that, watching a matchup between decks that you don't play is still valuable, is if you're really absorbing it, studying it, looking at it, you kind of learn like, oh, like this is what Isilio does, this is what he's trying to achieve in his game plan. And when this person destroyed or threatened Isilio's arsenal when he had Gona Flash in his hand, that was really bad for him. And like, there's lots of things that kind of transfer over that are, you maybe don't expect to get out of watching the game, or maybe you don't even know that you've learned from watching the game, but you will kind of like make use of when you're playing your own games in the future.
Yeah. Watching games with a plan, is that the right word? With an objective, like just making sure that you're trying to gain something, absorb something while watching is going to be important, and not just watching it for the drama.
Yeah. And I guess another tip on the watching stuff, you can speed games up. Don't go so fast that you miss things, but I usually watch things at 4 times speed and sometimes seek through them. And I'll pause. If there's like an interesting decision point, I'll pause and think about it. But you don't need to sit there and watch them tank. Like,
it's true.
Like I usually watch like all the coverage games, but the reality is like I go through the calling and it takes day 1, day 2, and it takes me like 2 hours or less. So, putting that into perspective, like these events are long, but you don't have to sit there and watch all the between round stuff. You don't have to sit there and watch someone tank for 2 minutes because it's a really important decision. You just need to get to the decision point. What are they thinking about? What's important? What would I think about? What was the outcome? And that's like kind of good enough.
Just going back a little bit for about the specialist point of view, things like if you are going to be a specialist, it's not only do you need to know your deck inside out, if your deck is not meta, you also kind of need to know your opponent's deck inside out. Like, for example, I play a lot of Arachne Huntsman. that deck is so bad that you kind of need to know exactly what your opponent is trying to do to be able to beat their deck, and you get the edge that they don't know what you're doing with your deck and how you're trying to beat them. So you really only get one chance at it too. So you really need to know your opponent's deck inside out if you are going to be a specialist. Obviously, you need to know your deck better than anybody else in the world, and you also need to know your opponent's deck kind of better than your opponent to be able to win with like tier 3, tier 4 decks. So a lot of studying does go a long way.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would say like you don't necessarily need to know everything about their deck, but you should at least know all the things about their deck that are relevant to the matchup you're playing. So maybe you don't know like how this Gravy Bones player plays against Verdance. Like that's fine, but you need to know all the things that Gravy Bones can do in this matchup that matter to you, and all the things that you can do to disrupt what they're doing. And you basically need to know like all the relevant interactions.
Yeah, you're right. You don't need to know how poppers affect the matchup if you're playing Arachne Huntsman. Yeah, that doesn't matter. But yeah, you really do need to know like the abilities and the game plans that your opponent can take to beat your own deck. And that's going to be really, really helpful. The only way I personally achieve like a slightly higher than 50% win rate on Arachne Huntsman is like a lot of the times my opponent will play a deck and I'll be like, I know this deck better than my opponent that's currently playing Syndra. And then because of that, I know exact breakpoints and like exactly the things that they want to do to try and beat me. And as long as I can prevent that, then I can win the game. And it's an extra step, and I would say I wouldn't recommend it because it's just a lot more work and you really don't get that much win percentage out of it.
Yeah.
So if you are trying to day 2 events, I would definitely suggest don't be a specialist. It's just not worth your time. You're gonna spend like 2 times, 3 times more time just thinking about other people's deck more than your own deck, and it's just not time efficient a lot of the times.
Yeah. I think just like picking a deck that you have seen doing well and is pretty strong at events, and then going deep on that deck is probably the best way to start doing well at events quickly. Because if you jump around too much, that can be detrimental. If you pick a weak deck, that can be detrimental. So pick something pretty strong, learn that deck inside out, and that's usually kind of like the best way forward. And then you can branch out to a second deck in the future. But yeah, I guess like before we wrap up, I'll just say like very generally, I think people that are day 2ing callings are probably like very regularly top 8ing their pro quests, might often win one a season. I usually see people like this play regularly. So at least for like thinking about our locals, they'll show up to Armory like once or twice a week, and they're probably playing some games at least during qualifier season and leading up to callings. They're going to be playing some games outside of those armories kind of regularly. So this is maybe not like an amount of time, but like a dedication level. Like people are showing up to their local events, doing well at their local events, and spending some additional time practicing. And I think exactly how much time that is and what that looks like varies person to person. We talked a lot about that, but you should probably be expecting to do more than just go to Armory and ProQuest.
I feel like that's a way to be on par with somebody that is like, doing that. And if you want to go well and beyond that, you have to do more than that, right? Like,
yeah,
that's kind of like the baseline of what people will do and are willing to do. So if you want to try and excel, or if you are like currently below that line of player, you do need to work harder to get above that line.
Yeah. Work harder or find more ways to improve the efficiency of your time. Those are kind of like the 2 roads that we touched on that you can do.
I think we can wrap it up here then.
Yeah, I think we covered this one pretty well. Anything else before we wrap up the episode?
No, I've been working on Arachne Huntsman for Seattle coming up in like 2 weeks. I'm gonna work a little bit more to brush up on the Arachne Marionette matchup now, but other than that, I've been feeling good about Arachne Huntsman. This deck's sweet.
Nice. Yeah, I need to, now that I have been getting caught up on real life stuff and I'm close to getting caught up on work stuff, I may try and get caught up on testing a little bit. Figure out what I'm playing. But anyways, thank you all for listening. Hope you found this episode helpful, and good luck to you in all of your upcoming events, whether that's callings or, RTNs in the new year, or whatever it is. Best of luck. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on social media. I'm at YukiLeeBender on Twitter and Blue Sky. Jay is at UedaJ on Twitter. You can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/onthebobble. We have a Discord for all of our patrons, any tier. So that's a great way to get in touch and get in touch with some of our kind of like community that we have built. And you can also email us at onthebobble@gmail.com. Maybe could have said this earlier, but if you have listener questions, please let us know. This episode, I think, was like mostly listener questions, or the bulk of it was a listener question, and I think it was honestly like a great topic that probably applies to a lot of people. And I think a lot of, especially this time when it's sort of like we're waiting for a Compendium of Wraith, it's a bit of a down season, holidays, is a great time for listener questions. So if there's something that you would like to have answered on the podcast, let us know, and we'd love to hear from you.